You ever sit down and think, wait a minute, everything that I'm consuming right now is going to outlive me all? Not to sound like a Debbie Downer here, but genuinely, long after we're gone, after our descendants are arguing about I don't know, who gets the last clean glass of water, DC is still going to be publishing their 1 billionth mid-issue of Harley Quinn. This is not going to go away. These characters are just not long-lived. They're immortal. That is what their purpose is. Permanent fixtures of pop culture. And because of that, they have to be kept in this weird, pristine comic book mint condition. Their personalities are either stagnant, they're fixed, or maybe they're already complete. If we look at the big heroes like Superman, like Batman, like Spider-Man, they've had a major, or all of their major development decades ago. Even if it's kind of recent, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, it's still been some time. The worlds can change though, the threats can evolve, but can they evolve? Well, they usually stay largely recognizable. That's part of the job when you're a franchise mascot. But here's the thing, fixed does not mean unmalleable. In fact, the malleability is what makes a lot of these modern stories good. The best modern stories are because of these fixtures. Watching how long-established heroes react to new environments, new people, new stakes, that is where creativity lies. Seeing all of these storytelling methods change is part of the sauce. That's what makes it fun. Sometimes, every so often, we're going to see one of our favorite characters go on some wild personal journey where they have to confront who they are after a massive shift in the status quo. And this is equally as valid. Traditionally though, the biggest chunk of character development from these staples comes from what people and writers like to call the inciting incident, the origin moment that flips their entire life upside down. That's when you get those drastic switches in personality, in goals, in worldview, and from there the hero steps into the world, learning and evolving as they go as a new superhero. But the big names, for the most part, those days are long gone. They've hit that emotional cap. And that brings us to the topic today, because while these stoic symbolized characters are cool and all, there's another archetype that is just as interesting that allows them to grow more, and that is the scumbag character. The overconfident, the arrogant, the insufferably smug menace who everyone hates at first. Sometimes even the readers hate them, but over time, they get molded into a genuinely compelling, better, lovable character while still keeping that spark of ego that made them entertaining in the first place. These characters go on full transformations from being very obnoxious to being iconic, beloved from a hated state, right? They're walking red flags to eventually heroes that we would actually trust in a fight. Kind of. Nah, mostly I'm joshing, we could trust them. So yeah, today guys, we're gonna jump straight into the biggest jerks in comics and how they have grown. Their journeys matter because of where they started, not just because of where they ended up. Yep, this guy sucks, and if you don't know who he is, this is Booster Gold, a complete fraud, but he does end up earning his legacy. Booster starts out as Michael John Carter, a kid from the 25th century, born into a broken family. His dad dips on him on his 4th birthday to not get milk, but to go chase gambling debt. And that wound never really leaves him at all. So when Michael grows up and becomes a star college quarterback, playing football, he ends up repeating the exact same sins he hated his father for. He throws games and he gambles on his own games so that he could get money. And even though he does use this money to pay for his mother's medical treatment, the second he gets caught, it breaks her heart. Anyways, right, as you might expect, because yes, while the mom is grateful for her clean bill of health, pun intended, she doesn't want her son to go down this path. I'm sure she would rather die than to let her son become a criminal. That right there is the core of early Booster Gold, a guy who wants to do good, but wants attention and validation even more. After serving his time in prison, he's working security at the Metropolis Space Museum when he sees it. He blinkers a little bit. The legends of the 20th century are on the screen. Superman, Batman, the Justice League, the kinds of heroes who defined entire eras, the golden and silver age of comics, and instead of being inspired to better himself the normal way, like a normal human being, this is Booster Gold, and Booster Gold requires Booster Gold solutions. He steals everything not nailed down: a Legion flight ring, Brainiac tech, a power suit, even the museum security robot, Skeets. Shout out Skeets, honestly, probably my favorite robot of all time. I know I'm D1 glazing, but I think that's very fair to say. Who wouldn't want to glaze this flying, reliable doohickey like it's literally the GOAT? He jumps straight into Rip Hunter's time machine, and he becomes the first influencer hero in history. Basically Logan Paul with a superhero suit and not exactly laughing at dead bodies. He's not here to save the world, he's here to get rich for saving the world. That's his A, B, and C. This is the starting point, a complete fraud with a sponsorship portfolio. And this version of Booster Gold follows him into Justice League International, where he becomes one half of one of the greatest duos in all of comics. Him and Ted Kord are chaos incarnate, running around casinos that end up being living islands, turning the League into a workplace comedy skit and getting into trouble because Booster desperately wants the one thing that he will never get at this point in time, and that is respect. Booster's early career is defined by wanting recognition he did not earn. But the thing that makes him special, the thing that makes his progression matter, is how much pain he goes through to finally get it. He loses his suit, he loses his arm, he gets humiliated, he gets written off by other heroes as a joke. And the real breaking point is Ted Kord's death. The moment Booster loses the anchor, the best friend he ever had, the one person who saw more than just a screw-up, that right there is where his entire arc pivots. That's when Booster finally stops trying to be famous and starts trying to be good. By the time you get to 52, the series, the crazy big event, not the reboot, Booster has turned his future knowledge into a brand, sponsorships, stage fights, fake heroics, but even that blows up in his face. And when the world is about to explode, Booster does the most un-Booster Gold thing imaginable. He sacrifices his own reputation, his own image, even his own life for what looks like it to save people. Not for a camera, not for money, not for a headline. He does something heroic with nobody watching. That's the turning point right there, because that's when the reveal hits. Booster didn't die. He teamed up with Rip Hunter, one of the DC Universe's greatest time travelers, to protect the timeline, secretly taking on the identity of Supernova and doing world saving behind the scenes. The kind of work where you can't take credit, the kind of work that doesn't come with trophies or brand deals or groupies. This is the work that matters, and he stays unknown. That's the beauty of his progression. He never stops being Booster. He's still loud, he's still confident, he's still a little bit ridiculous, but now there's a lot more weight, purpose, loss, growth, and he gains a better heart. That same ego that made him unbearable is now what gives him the edge to be brave enough to do the impossible and to be stupid enough to try, and usually it pulls off. He becomes somebody who doesn't just want to be a hero, he actually is one, even if no one else sees it. And this doesn't get better presented in anything other than his meetings with two versions of Batman. In Booster Gold issue 1 million, comics, don't worry about it, it's actually not that high of a number, but he ends up having an argument with Batman. This time the relationship was very shaky after his position on the death of Blue Beetle after Infinite Crisis. Everybody was kind of not liking each other after this event, and then we see Batman just throw a bunch of photos onto the ground, and you might be using your detective brains thinking, why would he do that? The photos end up being pictures of Barbara Gordon when she was shot by the Joker. Of course, he had his little camera and his little Hawaiian t-shirt, but actually we end up seeing Booster Gold in the pictures, and he asks, how did you get this? The whole time Booster was trying to go into the past to save Barbara. Batman says, from a camera the Joker had on him the night he shot and paralyzed Barbara Gordon. I've held on to them for years. When you showed up, you weren't wearing the same uniform. You were younger, so I waited until you grew up. And he's like, what's going on? What are you doing, Michael? He said, I tried to save Barbara from getting shot. I couldn't do that. I tried to save Ted too, but instead, I tied a big knot in time. I couldn't save anyone I wanted to because I am a joke. Obviously, if you try to change the timeline and you don't have the proper protection, time will do things to make sure that you lose. And Batman says, a joke? I don't know what you're up to, but I can see the pain and punishment you took from the Joker. You were literally tortured. You risked your life for a chance she might walk again. I can stop people from changing the past for the worst, but I can't change it for the better, and I can't let anyone know. I swear I had the Royal Flush Gang, but God, it's driving me crazy. He's like, let the world think you're crazy. If that's what it takes to be the best you can be, Michael. You proved me wrong. You proved yourself wrong. If you ever need somebody to talk to, I might not be Ted Kord, but I'll listen. He says, whatever you're doing, keep it up. That is beautiful. And then we see him later on in the same run talk to Dick Grayson when he's Batman and Bruce Wayne is completely MIA, and we see how mature he's become after a discussion about protecting the timeline, which is interesting because in the past, he would end up just doing whatever he wanted just for the sake of improving his rep. He says here, being able to travel through time, that would make you the ultimate detective. There isn't a crime you couldn't solve, no mystery you wouldn't know the answer to. He says, true, but that's not really what I'm about. Though to be honest, there are a few historical events I've gone back in time to check out. I know who the model of the Mona Lisa really was. I know what really happened at the Delhi Plaza back in '63. I know why the Titanic really sank. I mean, iceberg? Really? Get real. I know who sabotaged the Hindenburg, where Amelia Earhart really went. I saw the Great Pyramids get built. I saw the crucifixion, Krypton's destruction, Abin Sur's crash, First Contact. One of these days, I'll even check out the birth of existence. Flexing much, huh? And then Dick Grayson says, so the rather trite but ethereal question, why don't you go back in time, kill Hitler's mother, and prevent his birth? And he says, what if I flip for that? What if I give you a gun, take you back in time, and say, there's the Joker's grandmother right there. As a 6-year-old, kill her, and that maniac will never be born. Would you do it? Touché. This is what it's really all about, because if the universe's biggest showboat can grow into one of DC's most important unsung heroes, then any douchebag character archetype can become legendary. Let's make our way to Wally West, one of, dare I say it, top 5 greatest DC characters of all time. His journey is very compelling, and one of the best evolutions in comics in my opinion, because it's earned, it's messy, and it's painfully human. And a lot of Flash fans, tell me if you heard this before, a lot of Flash fans will tend to point people when they ask, what run should I start off with? They say the Mark Waid run, which is like going straight to the finals and winning a championship. That might be the greatest run of Flash ever, but it's like, we need to see the build-up. That's what makes everything a lot more engaging, and you feel for Wally more as a character. That's why I will always recommend starting at the beginning. I'm pretty sure of Flash Volume 2 or 3, the first post-crisis Flash run. That's where you see Wally grow as a human being. But let's go all the way back to his origin. It starts with a kid running away from home, literally. Like, that's literally one of the first things we see him do. He grows up in this little town called Blue Valley, in a household that's very cold, very dismissive, and at times could outright be abusive, depending on which version of Wally that could be, you know, physical abuse or just verbal abuse. His parents mocked his ambitions, shut down his emotions, and treated his daydreams like flaws. They tried to verbally beat it out of him. And then he meets Barry Allen and becomes Kid Flash. Barry was his hero, and he had the chance to have a superhero fantasy in his life fulfilled. And it's the first time an adult truly believes in him. That validation becomes the core of his identity because he's trying to live up to Barry Allen, and he feels like he can never surpass him. Early Wally is desperate to impress, to be seen, and completely blind to the way that his actions are affecting the people around him. It's a foundation that explains so much about his insecurity, his ego, and recklessness that we see later, but as a kid, he was a pretty good boy, to say the least. I gotta stop. Anyways, by the time he hits the Wolfman Perez era of Teen Titans, Wally has grown a little bit, but not enough. He's sharp, but he's also judgmental and quick to lecture anyone who doesn't meet his moral or political standards. And even if he's not trying to have a full-on battle about who is right or who's wrong, he doesn't let others explain their opinion without shutting it down. He postures consistently, acting like he understands life better than everyone else. Women are often reduced into like roles instead of treated like people. He considers people like Wonder Girl and Starfire to be the direct exceptions to the female gender or sex, right? They are people that can take initiative. Most women aren't like that in his early opinion. I know this man is very not likable in the beginning. It's a flaw that becomes a lot more obvious when he eventually quits the Teen Titans over philosophical differences. Charismatic? Yeah, sure, you could say that. Mature? Not at all. He wants to be Barry Allen, but he hasn't yet learned why Barry was great. And sure, Barry Allen also had a lot of these tendencies, a lot of these political views, and his parents also had it too, which shows you why this was instilled into him. But as a character, he was self-sacrificial. He'll make sure to get something done and help others no matter what they really are, right? He's still the same emotionally stunted person as he was as a kid in Blue Valley, but now is a lot more aggressive. And then Crisis on Infinite Earths hit, and Wally's world falls apart. Barry dies, and the pedestal that Wally relied on so much that he put Barry on is ripped away. The antimatter blast weakens his powers, wipes out the physical pain that has defined him, and forces him into boots far too big to fill. At the beginning of the Flash run, he is a lot weaker than what he was as Kid Flash, and he has to build his way up to being as fast as Barry, and then faster, over a multitude of arcs, issues, and years. Here is a period that exposes all of Wally's very messy tendencies. He takes jobs as the Flash for money. He sells out for the sake of brand deals, kind of like Booster Gold, and I hope that a lot of you guys are realizing that this version of Wally is very similar to the Justice League Unlimited version, but just a lot more despicable and not likable. He wins the lottery, and then he blows the lottery winnings on a mansion. He burns through relationships and treats heroism like a brand rather than responsibility. He thinks he's honoring Barry by wearing the suit, but in reality, he is running away from what he could truly be, all of his potential. He's just throwing it away. Everything starts to change in William Messner Loeb's run when he moves to Keystone City. Here he meets Linda Park, who refuses to coddle him or idolize him. She challenges him, calls out his ego, his immaturity, and sees the hurt little boy that's been hiding all his life. Keystone also introduces him to Pied Piper, a former member of his rogues gallery who is a gay man who becomes one of Wally's first true friends in the city. Piper forces Wally to confront uncomfortable truths about society, about the struggles of those less fortunate, and even about his own discomfort with sexuality. When Wally is homeless and at his lowest, Piper opens his eyes to the broader world, and their bond grows into a deep, everlasting friendship that still goes on to this day. Keystone City gives Wally a working class community. That is what Keystone is built on, very hard workers for generations and building a foundation for their family. Mentors like Jay Garrick and Max Mercury, and the chance to build a life instead of running away from one, all built onto one solid Flash. And for the first time, he isn't trying to be like Barry. Now he's figuring out how to be himself. And then we get to the Mark Waid run, and this solidifies Wally's transformation. He isn't just a legacy character living in the shadow of Barry Allen anymore. He's a Flash that finally decided to choose growth instead of being stagnation. The thesis of the Flash is to always keep moving. Why should he not choose growth? He shares the Speed Force. He learns about it. He finds out everything he can do with it. He mentors Bart Allen, the grandson of Barry. He builds meaningful relationships with Kyle Rayner, and he also has the Titans that he built up throughout the Messner Loebs era, and of course in the Mark Waid era, just bringing back old friendships, right? He understands they can't save everyone, but also the identity itself isn't just a mask. It's a responsibility, and you have to work at it. You have to work at being a hero 24/7. And his relationship with Linda Park, becomes the emotional anchor of the Speed Force and his love. Where Barry had Iris, Wally now has Linda. A man who once couldn't take accountability now becomes a father figure for the Flash family. And speaking of a father figure, he becomes a husband and a father with 2 twins, and today he even has a baby. So he has 3 kids right now. The contrast is staggering. This guy was once somebody who treated women as accessories, sleeping around, being exactly the type of person that you don't want to be with, and also believing that they had no free will and they're subservient to men, to now believing and treating Linda as his equal, a Korean American woman, which is completely different from the white lady that he thought that he was going to be with when he was in the Titans in the Marv Wolfman era, right? This is crazy. He now values stability. The boy who ran from trauma now confronts everything head on. No more judgments, no more conservative teen here. He's now the most empathetic hero there is, and there's nothing wrong with being conservative, but Wally was taking it really crazy, and unlike other characters where there's like a huge sudden change this is a 20-year story arc about overcoming the worst parts of your upbringing, not just gaining powers, but gaining the ability to become a better person. That's why this is one of the most remarkable evolutions in all of comics. These guys are actually some of the most underrated characters there is, and yes, everybody knows Booster Gold now because he's having a TV show. Yes, everybody knows Wally West from the TikTok edits, from Young Justice, Teen Titans, from Teen Titans Go, all these things, but people don't really give them their flowers because they don't read the comics. The new gens, that is. Everyone who's been in the comic sphere for a while has probably been recommended a book from one of these two guys, but just in general, these guys deserve their flowers. Can I get a retweet? No? Okay. Well, that was unnecessary. Copyright strike, here we come. Eddie Brock and the symbiote, when both of those forces join, they create the identity of Venom. But both of their stories, symbiote and Eddie, very much diverged, and at certain points in history, they intersect. Here, I'm going to be talking about Eddie Brock and not the symbiote because that is where the true ego comes from. He wasn't always Venom. He started off as a journalist, and he believed a byline that he had, and his father's approval here could define his life. So these two entities here could bring him back to where he needs to be, but he believed that he was that guy. He believed after some stories here and there, he was an A1 journalist. He was not that guy, but some people need to be humbled, and for him, karma came back with a vengeance, a crazy vengeance that might have went a little bit too far, but his career seemed set, intercepting a letter from Emil Gregg, a man that he claimed to be the Sin Eater, the serial killer himself. Eddie had the exclusive, he had the interview set up, and this was his chance to be celebrated as a hero of journalism, his final step, but then the truth was revealed. Everything started to unravel. Spider-Man exposed the real killer, a cop named Stan Carter, I believe, and Eddie went from a rising star, he was going straight up, to a public laughingstock. He was fired, he was abandoned by his wife, he was disowned by his father, and brother also developed cancer. That was 4 for 4. I could never, bro. He was left with nothing but a burning hatred for the man who just stole his moment. That, of course, was Spider-Man. He then used that hate as a catalyst for a new transformation. He was overwhelmed by despair, which led to him going to the Lady Saints Church, right? Contemplating suicide, but then also seeking for forgiveness. You could see the contradictory nature within Eddie Brock, and it was there where he encountered the alien symbiote that once bonded to Spider-Man and gave him the black suit. Now, drawn together over the mutual loathing of Peter Parker, Eddie and the symbiote created Venom, something that was more powerful than the sum of their parts. What began as vengeance and a vendetta to be poisoned onto Peter Parker became a force the world could not ignore. Those early days, though, they were mad, violent, and chaotic. He targeted Peter Parker and those close to him, exploiting the symbiote's immunity to Spider-Man's spider senses. They were unstoppable, but they were also flawed because they were predators fueled by hatred as much as they were fueled by a weird sense of justice. Another interesting contradictory dichotomy to his character. Over time, small acts of heroism began to emerge from that shell, saving a baby in Central Park, developing a code, realizing that vengeance alone could not define him, or shouldn't define him at all. Villainy was never far from his path. Battles with Cletus and the symbiote Carnage forced Eddie to think about the bigger picture, to confront chaos on a larger scale. From island-wide shutdowns to city-wide conflicts, maximum carnage, that entire event, he learned that the symbiote is driven by rage. Well, how about we turn that into a reluctant protector? When the stakes themselves exceed personal vendettas, you have to change. Eddie was not a traditional hero in any sense, but I thought that he was evolving into something much more than a monster, and San Francisco actually became a crucible for that evolution. As a protector, Eddie defended the homeless from corporations, from mercenaries, and even rival symbiotes that were his offspring. It taught him that power, just like Spider-Man, demanded responsibility because these guys were his kin. Now he was guided by both human and alien instincts. He was able to stumble through moral gray areas and make choices that made sense. Allies and enemies alike, from Spider-Man to symbiotes, shaped him into a man capable of discernment in the face of overwhelming strength and adversity. Growth, however, was never a linear progression. Cancer, manipulation, all of this was an ongoing struggle against the darker parts of himself, right? It forced Eddie to confront who he was at every turn. It wasn't an easy slope all the way up to being a good guy. He had to deal with more, something that we saw with every new Bond. When he bonded with Toxin, he had to deal with his predatory instincts coming back. When it came to him being bonded with Anti-Venom, he used his symbiote powers to cure others and contain his own darkness. However, he had a very egotistical messiah-like complex, seeing himself as a Christ-like figure, healing the weak. It reaffirmed to all of us as readers that the central truth to his character is that power can corrupt you, but it can also redeem you when tempered by your own conscience. And finally, we make our way to the biggest status quo shift of Venom and his entire mythos, from the Donny Cates Venom run, where the scope of Eddie's journey reached it was cosmic in proportion. He encountered Null, the symbiote god, the King of Black, Dark Carnage. All of these guys really tested his limits, his morality, his power, his endurance of ideology. The apocalyptic threat to the universe also was counteracted by learning that he was a father and that his son had very terrifying new abilities. How did Eddie survive all of this though? He was consistently aware that redemption was a struggle. He could never abandon that, even if the fate of the universe was hung in the balance. Today though, Eddie embodies the lessons of his past. Every symbiote alliance, every battle that he was in, reflects the man that he was, once an egotistical person that wanted to destroy Spider-Man's life, thinking that he deserved better than he had, and attacking those that disagreed with him and that did him wrong. Begging for his life in church, a man who lost everything. Now he clawed his way back, all the way from despair, with strength and an unshakable will. He is more than Venom now, a testament that even monsters can choose to protect and not to destroy. The Merc with the mouth, Deadpool himself. As a character, he's somebody that's been a villain just like Venom, and he's transitioned his way slowly into being a hero, an anti-hero, somebody with a heart of gold. And honestly, if I'm gonna be completely honest, I would trust him more than the Punisher to make the right decision. There, I said it, hands up. I know some of you guys might try to shoot me, but I'm telling you, this guy, he might be insane, he might be psychotic because of the amount of brain damage that he's experienced over his entire life, the cancer too, and all the trauma in his life as a child, as a mercenary, as whatever, right? He's been through a lot of stuff and his brain chemistry isn't all there, but Punisher also isn't all there as well, and nobody asked for this opinion. I know I'm kind of yapping right now, but let me just get back on topic. Wade Wilson in his early years was far less dramatic, far less cartoony, far less than the man he would eventually become. Though he often framed his childhood as tragic or broken, he usually had the perspective of Joker, right? He believed that if he were to have a backstory or a past, it's better that it would be multiple choice, and that's because, well, he doesn't exactly remember, and there's a lot of rigmarole behind the canonicity between the events of like his past and his parents and whatever might happen, a lot of retroactive continuity, but there was a time where it was revealed that his parents were still alive in Canada, living ordinary, normal human lives, right, and even keeping his childhood room the exact same. The tragedy, though, is that he completely lost himself, right? He didn't know who he was. When he returned home as an adult, he didn't even recognize the house, his parents, which is crazy, or even the room he grew up in. So whatever Wade became afterwards, it actually started off with him as a young man, when he no longer felt connected to anything that once defined him. After leaving home, as you might expect, Wade tried to build himself up to bring his life more purpose through the US Special Armed Forces, and he had a very raw, special talent to kill people, but the instinct in his heart was to follow his own moral compass over direct orders. You can see the foundation of his redemption arc, and it does lead to him getting expelled from the force, and I actually can't tell if he wanted it or not because he was going through it, brother. He didn't know if he wanted to be tangled in all of this gray wire, and eventually eventually, near his 19th birthday, he actually tried to off himself, but it was, a failed attempt. It led to him being recruited by the CIA, a backed Black Ops program, which promised him what he needed: clarity, that the targets that he was going against, quote-unquote, deserved death. So here, he was convinced that everything that he was doing meant the world was being bettered. It was for the greater good, a sales pitch that is given to a lot of soldiers that are meant to do a lot of grimy things. And here, he worked as a mercenary across the globe in a very fractured period of his life. From Canada to Japan, he was working everywhere, and he actually ended up falling in love with 2 people, and he lost both of those relationships because he couldn't bring himself to cross moral lines that he was employed to do. Wade kept running away from violence just like Wolverine, but somehow, violence always stayed one step ahead of him. It wasn't until he finally fell in love with a Vanessa Carliti, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that final name, that Wade started to believe in a future beyond killing. But that future collapsed very quickly when he learned that he had dozens of tumors in his body. He was riddled by cancer cells, and rather than let her suffer with him, Wade walked away. He believed that to be the best choice in his heart, the most humane choice, even though I exactly don't agree with that. But he abandoned his treatments and he quietly prepared to die. That's when Department K came in and offered him a miracle. Weapon X program, Wolverine's DNA, you get a second chance at life. You're able to freeze your cancer, preserve your body, and make you stronger. And it worked for a time, but his healing factor overloaded those cancer cells, and he became a literal tumor crazy man. Like, actually, look at his skin. He needs his skincare routine now, quickly, but there's nothing to do. He's literally Two-Face, but like on his entire body. Like, he makes my skin itch. I'm sorry to say it, Wade, but it's just unfortunate. It just ravaged his body, and it got him cast out as a failed experiment. And Ajax, similar to the movie, actually fought him as he was trying to escape the facility after knowing that they literally wronged him. But unlike the movie, it led to a very interesting thematic situation that's kind of on the nose, but since it was retroactively added to his life, it's not that bad. It's actually really cool for his entire story, where Ajax literally ripped out his heart and left him to die. Here, his revenge, his sheer will, jump-started his healing factor, resurrected him, brought him back a new heart, and from there he became a completely different person, a corpse fueled by revenge. This is the true birth of Deadpool. Now, Deadpool is an identity that he started to embrace as an assassin. He felt very unstable, not knowing who he was, whatever Wade Wilson as a concept really is, so he fell back into his mercenary life. He clashed with American operatives, Canadian operatives, worked briefly with the Kingpin, and even kept Blind Owl, the same grandma woman from the movies and the comics. He kept her captive in a very twisted mockery of a companionship, very evil, weird stuff. And yet, even in the ugliest parts of his life, Wade kept searching for meaning, returning to the Canadian government for treatment, acquiring teleportation tech, and drifting between jobs meant to give him purpose, but they never felt quite fulfilling. They never actually filled the void that was left within him. Every step of the journey, we see Wade trying to reinvent himself from a soldier to an assassin to a lover to a patient to an experiment to a mercenary. Each and every single time, he ends up being in conflict with those who are good, those who are bad, those who are morally wrong. He can never choose a side, so there he just has to make jokes. He has to keep a levity to him, because without it, he doesn't know what the purpose of his life is. And as somebody with a crazy healing factor, crazy skills, enhanced stats, you can actually annoy your enemies to no end. And for Deadpool, he was just using that as an outlet to feel like the man that he's supposed to be, but he knows that he's on the wrong path. He hopes that all of these identities that I just listed will be the one that finally sticks, but Deadpool's growth has always been warped. Every time he tries to be better, the world reshapes him back into its weapon. The trauma, the experiments, the torture, the cancer. As I'm listing this, you can see that he's in a constant state of loss. It culminated in a person who survives everything physically, but struggles to survive himself emotionally and ethically, even just mentally, all of it wrapped up in one bubble. A man who can heal from any wound except the ones in his past is what defines him long before he embraces the humor, the fourth wall breaking, even the heroism. It's the tragedy that built the Merc with the mouth. You can feel any type of way that you want as somebody who's seasoned, who has a talent for winning no matter what the odds are. He has something holding him back, something that prevents him from being his true self, and that is the struggle of Deadpool, joking through the pain even though you know for sure you can't truly be whole. But yeah, guys, what do you think? These are my favorite characters. Characters that do the worst things, but try their best to be better. And over time, they eventually win the opinion and the admiration of the audience themselves. Who are your favorite characters? Let me know down in the comments down below. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later. Take care. Deuces. Peace.